Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Public Service Commission of South Carolina. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. We're back for our afternoon session in docket number 2022-2-E. The applicant has completed their case, and now it's time for SACE and CCL to present their case. Mr. Beach should be on the witness stand. While we wait for Mr. Beach to take the witness stand, we're going to take roll. Present in the hearing room, we have Commissioners J. Williams, Caston, C. Williams, Thomas, Powers, and Belzer. Joining us virtually, we have Commissioner Caston. Mr. Beach, are you ready to testify?
I am.
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Irvin, I think I may have omitted you. Commissioner Irvin is joining us virtually. Please accept my apology, sir. All right. Ms. Mixon, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
SACE and CCL call R. Thomas Beach to the stand.
Mr. Beach, if you would raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Beach, will you please state your name for the record?
Yes, my name is R. Thomas Beach.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I am the principal consultant of the consulting firm Cross Border Energy.
Could you please describe your experience with resource planning, rate design, and rate making issues for natural gas and electric utilities?
Yes, I have more than 40 years of experience in this field. I began my career in 1981 on the staff at the California Public Utilities Commission, working on the implementation of the Public Utilities Regulatory Policies Act, on the restructuring of California's natural gas industry, and as an advisor to 3 different commissioners. Since leaving the CPUC in 1989, I've had a private consulting practice on energy issues and have appeared, testified, or submitted comments, studies, or reports on numerous occasions before the state energy regulatory commissions in many states. My CV, which is attached as Exhibit RTB-1 to my direct testimony, includes a list of the formal testimony that I've sponsored in state regulatory proceedings concerning electric and gas utilities.
Thank you, Mr. Beach. And could you describe more specifically your experience with issues related to net energy metering and distributed energy resources, including rate design, avoided cost issues, in calculating the costs and benefits of distributed solar generation and other types of distributed energy resources?
Yeah, I've worked on issues concerning the calculation of avoided costs throughout my career, including sponsoring testimony on avoided cost issues in state regulatory proceedings in South Carolina and 8 other states. With respect to benefit cost issues concerning renewable distributed energy resources, I have sponsored testimony on net metering and solar economics in South Carolina and 10 other states. Since 2013, I have co-authored benefit cost studies of NEM or solar distributed generation in South Carolina and 7 other states. And finally, since 2007, I've sponsored numerous pieces of testimony in state regulatory dockets on rate design issues concerning solar distributed generation and other types of DERs like electric vehicles.
Thank you, Mr. Beach. Mr. Chairman, at this time, based on Mr. Beach's extensive experience and qualifications, we would request that he be qualified as an expert witness in issues related to net energy metering and distributed energy resources, including rate design, avoided cost issues, and calculating the costs and benefits of distributed solar generation and distributed energy resources.
Objections from the parties? Hearing no objection from the parties, Mr. Beach is qualified as an expert in the areas you just stated, Ms. Mixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Beach, did you cause to be pre-filed in this docket on March 15th, 2022, direct testimony consisting of 34 pages?
Yes.
And do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed direct testimony at this time?
No, I do not.
If the questions put to you in your testimony were asked of you at the hearing today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Thank you. And did you also attach to your direct testimony 2 exhibits identified as exhibits RTB-1 and RTB-2?
Yes.
And were the exhibits to your testimony prepared by you or under your direction?
Yes, they were.
Thank you, Mr. Beach. Mr. Chairman, I would move to have Mr. Beach's pre-filed direct testimony entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. R. Thomas Beach's direct testimony will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you. And I would also move to have exhibits RTB-1 and RTB-2 as attached to Mr. Beach's pre-filed direct testimony entered into the record as the next composite hearing exhibit.
Mr. Beach's exhibit marked RTB 1 through 2 will be entered into the record as a composite exhibit, and that's hearing exhibit number 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Beach, did you prepare a summary of your direct testimony today?
Yes, I did.
Would you please read your summary to the commission?
Certainly. Good afternoon, Chairman Williams and members of the commission. My name is Tom Beach, and I'm testifying in this proceeding on behalf of the South Carolina Coastal Conservation League and the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. My testimony in this proceeding reviews the values that Dominion Energy South Carolina has calculated for distributed solar resources, and whether those values comply with the requirements of the NEM methodology that is set out in Commission Order number 2015-194, as that order was modified this past year by the Commission's order in the generic net metering proceeding, which was Order 2021-569, and which I will call the generic NEM order. Order number 2015-194 adopted the NEM methodology, which calculates the net value, in other words, the net benefits of DER generation to determine the amount of under or over recovered revenue from net metering customers who have applied before June 1st, 2021. My understanding of the accounting here is that the utilities may recover through the fuel rider the difference between the revenue lost to NEM customers minus this value of the distributed solar. This is what is referred to as the DER NEM incentive. This accounting creates an inverse relationship between the net benefits of DERs and the DER NEM incentive that the utility collects from ratepayers, meaning that as the value of solar increases, the DER NEM incentive, and thus its impact on the fuel rider paid by ratepayers, decreases. So adopting my calculations will reduce bills for Dominion ratepayers. I believe this accounting is consistent with what Mr. Rooks testified to earlier today. As such, it's critically important to ensure that the benefits of DERs are accurately and fully accounted for to ensure ratepayers are not overpaying the utility on the basis of an incorrect solar valuation. The NEM methodology quantifies the net benefits based on a value stack of costs that the utility avoids, such as avoided energy, avoided capacity, avoided transmission and distribution, among others. The utility will avoid these costs as a result of using renewable DER generation instead of other generation sources. There is also the long-term value of DERs as a physical hedge against volatile fossil fuel prices, such as what the world is experiencing in recent weeks. All of the categories of benefits and costs in this value stack are quantifiable and have been quantified in other NEM or distributed generation benefit cost studies that rely on well-accepted techniques. In the generic NEM order, the Commission endorsed the continued use of this value stack, but modified or provided additional direction on how to calculate certain benefits, including requiring utilities to use best efforts and best practices to populate all benefits in the value stack with a non-zero value. Despite this additional direction, Dominion continues to use zero values for a number of quantifiable benefits, and its calculations do not comport with best practices or the methodologies approved by the Commission in the generic NEM order. Overall, the utility significantly undervalues the benefits of distributed solar, which actually will mean higher customer bills were the Commission to approve the utility's calculations. My testimony highlights the following errors for certain components and offers corrected calculations. Dominion's proposed avoided energy costs do not include calculation of the seasonal and temporal variations in avoided energy cost as required by the generic NEM order. Dominion is certainly capable of calculating its hourly marginal costs using its Plexos modeling software. Dominion should use the seasonal and time of use periods approved in the recent avoided cost proceeding to determine solar-weighted avoided energy costs as a straightforward means to comply with the generic NEM order. Dominion's calculation also undervalues avoided capacity costs in two key ways. First, the generic NEM order adopted my recommendation that forecasts of avoided capacity costs take into consideration the hours in which utility loads are likely to peak and when generation is most needed. But Dominion instead assigns the same weight to each day of the year, meaning that the utility's calculation doesn't differentiate between solar's capacity contribution on a spring day when peak demand is lower versus a hot summer day when demand is much higher and reliability is more threatened. Because Dominion's calculation does not comply with the generic NEM order in this way, I recommend that the Commission require the utility to use the calculation set out in my testimony, which complies with the Commission's directive by looking at solar output only in the top 10% of hours when Dominion experiences its highest loads. I also use 15 years of historical hourly Dominion loads to capture both summer and winter peaks. This approach also accounts for the appreciable amount of solar on Dominion's system today by looking at hours with both the highest retail loads and at the hours with the highest loads net of the solar resources on Dominion's system. Ultimately, I recommend that 26.5% of a solar PV project's capacity be assumed to contribute to meeting Dominion's capacity needs in its peak load hours, as opposed to the 3.4% used by Dominion. Second, Dominion's avoided capacity value assumes that the utility's first capacity need is in 2028, despite its recently approved plans to add capacity by building new combustion turbines in the coming year. As such, I have recalculated Dominion's avoided generation capacity costs in recognition that the utility has an immediate need for new capacity. Next, Dominion continues to set the current value of avoided transmission and distribution costs at zero without justification. My analysis shows that the existing solar on its system has reduced its T&D costs historically, is reducing them today, and will lower them in the future. Further, Dominion provides an unsubstantiated value for the avoided T&D over the 20-year period. From what I can tell, the company's long-term estimate of avoidable T&D costs requires an arbitrary segregation of which T&D projects are capacity related and which are not, even though a transmission or distribution project often can have multiple purposes, both addressing reliability issues and resulting in an expansion of the system capacity. In contrast, the Nero regression method that I use in my testimony to calculate the utility's avoided T&D capacity is a long recognized approach used by other U.S. utilities to determine their long-run marginal T&D capacity costs. My method shows a long-term correlation between peak demand on the Dominion system and the utility's investments in T&D over a 15-year period from 2009 to 2025. This long-term calculation of marginal or avoided T&D costs is a rigorous estimate of how the utility's T&D investments change as a function of peak demand, and reflects the reality that, to the extent distributed resources can reduce Dominion's peak demand, distributed resources will avoid capacity-related T&D costs. Dominion also continues to set the fuel hedge value at zero, stating that it does not have a program to use forward markets to hedge financially the costs of its purchases of fossil fuels. However, the fuel hedge component of the value stack, as stated in the NEM methodology, requires the utility to calculate the benefits associated with serving a portion of its load with a resource, such as distributed solar, that has less volatility from fuel costs than the fossil fuels that the solar replaces. This is a physical hedge, not a financial hedge. Solar, of course, has no fuel costs. The fuel is free. Dominion does, in fact, engage in long-term physical hedging through all of its programs to develop renewable generation. Renewable generation, such as solar PV, reduces a utility's use of natural gas and thus decreases the exposure of ratepayers to the volatility and periodic spikes in natural gas prices, such as the price run-up we are experiencing today. These spikes have occurred regularly over the last several decades, and most recently over the 2021 forecast period, causing a 26% increase in the fuel rider in this case, with this increase constituting the lion's share of the proposed 6% increase in overall electric rates. This increase would have been even greater absent the utility's non-fossil generation, and as a result, ratepayers realize a significant hedge value to any deployment on the Dominion system of renewable resources that have zero fuel costs. My testimony quantifies this fuel hedge value using a method developed for the Maine Public Utilities Commission. Dominion subtracts an integration cost from the value of solar that is equivalent to the integration charge approved in the most recent avoided cost proceeding. However, the generic NEM order specifies that for the purposes of the NEM methodology value stack, this cost component may apply only to exported power from solar customers. Assuming conservatively that 50% of distributed solar output is exported, I recommend reducing this cost component per unit of solar output by half to comply with the generic NEM order. Lastly, despite the Commission's clear directive in the generic NEM order that the best practice is to calculate avoided line losses on a marginal basis considering only daylight hours when solar PV produces, Dominion is not using marginal losses in all cases. For example, Dominion assumes that average transmission losses are representative of marginal transmission losses when generally marginal losses are at least 50% greater than average losses. Also, the utility applies its line loss adjustment to all components of the value of solar. This actually overstates the line loss adjustment, which should apply only to the energy and capacity related value components. Until more detailed analysis is available on Dominion's T&D losses by load level and time of day, I recommend making several changes to its calculation of avoided line losses to correct these issues. In sum, Dominion's proposed value stack includes a number of examples of non-compliance with the generic NEM order, and as a result, undervalues the benefits of distributed solar. For the reasons set forth in my testimony, I recommend that the Commission order Dominion to use the values in my testimony to calculate the DER NEM incentive. And that concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Beach. Mr. Chairman, witness Beach is available for cross-examination and questions from the Commission.
Cross-examination.
Nothing from the company.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Nothing from ORS.
Thank you, sir and ma'am. Commissioner questions? All right, Mr. Beach, thank you so much for your testimony, sir. You may step down, and you are excused.
Thank you very much.
Attorney Mixon, do you have anything else?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nope, that is all.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Office of Regulatory Staff. And Attorney Knowles, before you get started, sir, do you think you could finish your panels today?
We certainly hope so.
Okay, all right, please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, ORS would call its first panel of Mr. Anthony D. Brasino and Ms. Gretchen Poole.
All right, and they're here in person, correct?
Yes, sir, that's
all right.
correct.
Come on down.
And Mr. Chairman, I will be putting up Mr. Brasino, and Ms. Hare will be putting up Ms. Poole.
All right.
If you would raise your right hands, please. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Brasino.
Good afternoon, sir.
Would you please state your full name and occupation?
My name is Anthony D. Berzino, and I'm an audit manager for the Office of Regulatory Staff.
Are you the same Anthony D. Brasino who pre-filed 15 pages of direct testimony in this case on March 15th, 2022?
I am.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed testimony?
I do not.
If I asked you the same questions today as those posed in your pre-filed testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Mr. Chairman, ORS would ask that the pre-filed direct testimony of Anthony Brasino be read into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Anthony D. Brasino will be read into the record as if given orally from the stand. And Mr. Brasino, I must say that the force seems to be strong with you today.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Mr. Brasino, did you also cause to be filed with your direct testimony 8 exhibits marked ADB 1 through ADB 8?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes, edits, or corrections to your exhibits?
I do not.
Mr. Chairman, ORS would ask that Mr. Brasino's exhibits ADB 1 through ADB 8 be admitted into the record as the next hearing exhibit.
Mr. Brasino's exhibits will be marked ADB 1 through ADB 8. They will be marked and entered as a composite exhibit and as hearing exhibit number 6.
Thank you. Mr. Brasino, did you prepare a summary of your direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
Would you please share your summary with the commission?
Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. The purpose of my direct testimony is to explain the scope of ORS's examination of Dominion Energy South Carolina's books and records as they pertain to the company's operation of the fuel adjustment clause in the current filing, and to present the results of ORS's examination. ORS examined and verified the monthly over and under recovery calculations and balances as recorded by the company for the 12-month review period that ended December 2021. My direct testimony also explains the 8 exhibits that I sponsored for this hearing detailing those calculations. Based on ORS's review, ORS agrees with the balances and the adjustments as put forth by the company for the 12-month review period that ended December of 2021. This concludes my summary.
Ms. Poole, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I have to say, I'm sorry. I feel remiss that we didn't organize any Star Wars attire for you, but perhaps next time. Ms. Poole, will you please state your full name and occupation for the record?
Yes, my name is Gretchen Poole, and I'm employed by the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff as a senior analyst for energy efficiency and renewables.
And are you the same Gretchen Poole who pre-filed 9 pages of direct testimony in this case on March 15th, 2022?
Yes, I am.
Do you have any changes, edits, or corrections to your direct testimony?
No, I do not.
And if I asked you the same questions as those posed in your direct testimony today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that the 9 pages of pre-filed direct testimony of Gretchen Poole be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Gretchen C. Poole's pre-filed direct testimony will be read into the record as if given orally from the stand.
And Ms. Poole, along with your direct testimony, did you also file one exhibit marked as GCP1 in this case?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your exhibit?
No, I do not.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that the exhibit marked as GCP1 be admitted into the record as the next hearing exhibit.
Yes, ma'am. GCP1 will be marked and entered into the record as hearing exhibit number 7.
Ms. Poole, have you prepared a summary of your direct testimony?
Yes, I have.
Would you please present your summary to the commission?
Sure. Good afternoon, Chairman Williams and members of the commission. It's my pleasure to appear before you this afternoon. ORS found the company's actual and estimated avoided and incremental DERP costs in this proceeding to be reasonable and accurately calculated. Their calculations complied with Act 236 and with this commission's orders and directives in previous DERP-related proceedings. ORS recommends that the commission accept the company's proposed updates to the NEM tariffs. This concludes the summary of my direct testimony.
Thank you, Ms. Poole. Mr. Chairman, at this time, Mr. Brazino and Ms. Poole are available for questions from the parties and from the commissioners.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Cross-examination.
Yes, Chair Williams, I do just have a couple questions.
Okay, I'll get to you in short order.
Oh, sorry. Excuse me. Sorry.
Nothing, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right. Attorney Clancy, it is your floor. Your show, excuse me.
Great. Thank you. And Ms. Poole, I just have a couple questions for you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Great. Thanks. Well, I'll keep this short. You're familiar with Order 2021-569 from the generic net metering proceeding, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And that order modified the NEM methodology from 2015 in certain key respects, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Specifically, that order requires the utility to use best efforts and best practices to populate each category of value in the NEM methodology, correct?
Correct.
And in that generic net metering proceeding, ORS submitted testimony from Brian Horry, is that correct?
That's correct.
And are you familiar with that testimony?
Yes,
General
ma'am.
sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. So you're aware that Mr. Horry's testimony supported the valuation of avoided transmission and distribution, and even stated that there are myriad examples of jurisdictions that manage to derive an actual value for T&D. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And he also stated that even in a non-ideal situation where there's no locational granular data, it's more appropriate to use a system average value for avoided T&D than to assume there is no T&D value to the utility system.
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Now, fast forward to this year's fuel proceeding, the company is proposing to completely exclude T&D value from its NEM valuation for the current period. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And ORS, though, has recommended that the commission approve the company's proposed zero value for avoided T&D in the current period. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. That's all I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioners, questions for the panel? All right, hearing none. Mr. Brazino, Ms. Poole, thank you for your testimony today. You all may step down and you are. Oh, I'm sorry. Attorney here, any redirect?
Brief redirect.
Thank you.
Ms.
General
Poole, could you
Counsel, West
please
Virginia.
explain to the commission why ORS accepted the company's zero value for T&D and for line loss plan?
Sure. So the commission gave the company the flexibility to develop their T&D and marginal line loss plan that was filed with the company, with the commission this past November. They address all those values that Ms. Clancy was asking me about, and We are planning to participate in the stakeholder process related to that. It's slated to begin by the end of the second quarter of this year so that we can see that granular data as it is coming through, and we can ascertain at that time its relevance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was all I had for redirect.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm sorry for forgetting about your redirect. All right.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, may I just ask one brief question on recross?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Just wanted to ask you one question, Ms. Poole. Just to reiterate, according to witness Horry's testimony submitted in the generic net metering proceeding, isn't it the case that for avoided T&D, in the absence of a perfect calculation and estimation is actually more appropriate than excluding T&D capacity completely?
That is subject to check. I believe that is what his testimony stated, yes.
So in the absence of granular data, he recommended in this testimony deriving a system average value.
He did, however, this commission gave the company the flexibility to address that through their T&D and marginal line loss plan, which they have done.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm sorry for the additional question.
All right. I think this time I will actually be able to let you go. Mr. Brazino, Ms. Poole, thank you so much for your testimony. You may step down and you are excused. Attorney here, if you would, call your next panel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. ORS next calls Brandon Bickley and Michael Seaman-Wynn to the stand.
Gentlemen, if you would raise your right hands, please. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Bickley, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Would you please state your full name and occupation for the record?
My name is Brandon Sinclair Bickley. I am the manager in Energy Operations Division for the Office of Regulatory Staff.
And Mr. Bickley, are you the same Mr. Bickley who caused to be pre-filed 7 pages of direct testimony in this case on March 15th, 2022?
Yes, I am.
Do you have any changes, corrections, or edits to your direct testimony?
No, I do not.
And if I asked you those same questions as those posed in your direct testimony today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, I would move that the pre-filed direct testimony of Brandon Bickley be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Brandon S. Bickley will be read into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Bickley, along with your pre-filed direct testimony, did you also file 6 exhibits marked as BSB 1 through BSB 6?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your exhibits?
No, I do not.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, I would move to admit the exhibits of Mr. Bickley marked as BSB 1 through BSB 6 as the next hearing exhibit.
Mr. Bickley's exhibits marked BSB 1 through BSB 6 will be marked as a hearing exhibit and entered into the record as hearing exhibit number 8.
Mr. Bickley, have you prepared a summary of your direct testimony?
Yes, I have.
Would you please present your summary to the commission?
Certainly. Good afternoon, Chairman Williams and members of the Commission. The purpose of my direct testimony is to set forth ORS's recommendations resulting from ORS's examination and review of Dominion Energy South Carolina's power plant operations used in the generation of electricity to meet the company's retail customer requirements during the review period. In preparation for this proceeding, ORS examined various fuel and performance documents related to the company's electric generation and power plant outage and maintenance activities. ORS analyzed the company's monthly fuel reports, including power plant performance data, unit outages, heat rate data, and generation statistics. ORS also monitored electric generation statistics through industry and governmental publications. ORS attended via virtual participation The Nuclear Regulatory Commission's 2020 annual assessment meeting for the BC Summer Nuclear Station, which was held on April 22nd, 2021. Additionally, ORS met virtually with company personnel from various departments to discuss and review the company's electric generation, power plant outages, and maintenance activities. Based on ORS's review of the company's operation of its generation facilities during the actual period, ORS determined that the company made reasonable efforts to maximize unit availability and minimize fuel costs. ORS found the company's plant outages to be reasonable based on ORS's review of the outage data from the actual period, forecasted outage data from docket number 2021-2 ECHO, historical outage data from previous annual fuel proceedings, and industry experience. ORS also found the company's maintenance schedules and projected performance data for its power plants for the estimated period and the forecasted period to be reasonable. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Bickley. Good afternoon, Mr. Seaman Wen.
Good afternoon.
Would you please state your full name and occupation?
My name is Michael Seaman Wen. I am the Deputy Director of Energy Operations for the Office of Regulatory Staff.
Are you the same Michael Seaman Wen who pre-filed 8 pages of direct testimony in this docket on March 15, 2022?
Yes, I am.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed testimony?
No, I do not.
And if I asked you the same questions today as those posed in your pre-filed testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Mr. Chairman, ORS asks that the pre-filed direct testimony of Michael Seaman Wen be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Michael L. Seaman Wen will be read into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you. Mr. Seaman Wen, did you also cause to be filed with your direct testimony 5 exhibits marked MSH 1 through MSH 5?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes, edits, or corrections to your exhibits?
No, I do not.
Mr. Chairman, ORS would ask that Mr. Seaman Wen's exhibits MSH 1 through MSH 5 be marked and entered into the record as the next composite hearing exhibit.
Mr. Seaman Wen's exhibits marked MSH 1 through 5 will be marked as a composite exhibit and entered into the record as hearing exhibit number 9.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Seaman Wen, did you prepare a summary of your direct testimony?
Yes.
Would you please share that with the commission?
Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. My testimony sets forth the ORS's findings and recommendations resulting from our examination of Dominion Energy South Carolina's fuel expenses used in the generation of electricity to meet its South Carolina retail customer requirements. ORS examined various fuel-related documents as part of our review. Those documents address the company's fuel, environmental, and purchase power expenses for the actual, estimated, and forecasted periods. In preparation for this proceeding, ORS analyzed the company's monthly fuel reports. ORS examined the company's contracts for nuclear fuel, coal, natural gas, fuel oil, transportation, and environmental reagents. ORS also evaluated the company's policies and procedures for fuel procurement. ORS met with various company personnel on multiple occasions representing a variety of areas of expertise to discuss and review the company's fossil and nuclear fuel procurement, fuel transportation, environmental cost and compliance procedures, forecasting, and general company policies and procedures regarding fuel procurement. ORS reviewed the company's projected sales and analyzed them with regards to the projections from its last fuel proceeding and actual sales from the actual period. ORS found the company's sales projections to be reasonable and in line with historical sales data. ORS reviewed the company's forecasted costs for nuclear fuel, coal, natural gas, fuel oil, transportation, and environmental reagents for the estimated and forecasted periods. ORS compared the monthly projected costs to historical projections, actual data, and commodity prices from numerous industry publications. ORS found the company's forecasted costs to be reasonable. Should the Commission approve the rates as proposed by the company, the average monthly bill for a residential customer on Rate 8 using 1,000 kilowatt hours would increase from $125.92 to approximately $132.42, a net increase of $6.50. This total does exclude regulatory fees and gross receipts tax. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Seaman Wen. Mr. Chairman, this panel is available for questions from the parties and commission.
Thank you, sir. Cross-examination?
If I may, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
If the chair will indulge me, Madam Court Reporter, I think I will need Mr. Rook's Exhibit 1. You and I looked at it a moment ago. That will be it. Yes, thank you. Mr. Seaman Wen, how are you?
Doing well, sir.
I noticed from your well, let me try to get over here. I'll need some of the documents, so I'll have to go back for it. I noticed from your testimony, my recollection was refreshed, you've been with the ORS since 2006?
Yes, sir.
And I think you came to the ORS and have worked in the electrical department ever since, correct?
That's correct.
And you have testified a number of times before this commission on fuel matters, correct?
Over 25 times.
And would it be fair to say approximately a third of those would have been E&G and now Dominion fuel cases?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And as a part of your practice, I heard you testify, and you testified in your pre-file that you make personal examination of the facilities, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you review all the records that are submitted by the company?
Yes, sir.
You meet with your audit department?
On a daily basis.
And so you do your best to try to get a complete and full picture of a fuel case?
Yes.
All right, good. Now, I want to draw your attention, if I may. You've been here, I think, the whole hearing, right? You were here when Mr. Brooks testified, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
All right. I want to share with you, if I may, what I think is hearing Exhibit 3, which is AWR1, Mr. Brooks's first exhibit to his testimony. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
All right. And then I want to show you, you were here when I introduced into the record the April fuel report, hot off the press a moment ago, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
All right. And I don't know if your counsel has had a chance to share the detail with you, but I will show to you page 4 of 17, thank you, and ask you have you had a chance to see this particular spreadsheet?
I have, yes.
All right, good.
Let me say that I've seen the PDF. I actually have not seen the Excel spreadsheet.
That is fine. You've seen enough. Now, I want to simply elicit from you, if I may, your understanding of the actual fuel cost for this company through February. And I went through this exercise with Mr. Rooks, who was very, very helpful. And you understand, of course, that the actual period for the purpose of this fuel proceeding is the calendar year 2021, correct?
Yes.
And so the actual figure that Mr. Rooks had when and the company had when they introduced their evidence here showed the actual history through December 31 and a forecast through the period of April 30. Am I correct?
December 31, 2021 and April of 2022. Yes, sir.
All right. Now, just as by way of review, if you would look on Mr. Rooks' Exhibit 1 and look to under forecast, February 2022, do you see that?
Yes, I do.
And the forecast under collection, when the testimony was filed, was $133,489,000 and some change, correct?
Yes.
All right. Now, if I may draw your attention, please, to page 4 of 7 of the April 6 fuel report. And if you look to the actual column under February 2022, the total is 166 million and some change, correct?
Yes.
And so Mr. Rooks testified that, that the company's actual experience was that the undercollection grew by 32 million, more than they had forecast for the purpose of this proceeding, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you understood from Mr. Rooks that the company was not seeking recovery of that additional $32 million in this proceeding, correct?
Yes.
All right. Now, there have been some questions, I think, from the commission, and I'd like you to help me respond to those a little bit, about the tools that this commission and the ORS have in their toolkit to address these overcollections. So if you will help me. First of all, I think Commissioner Williams asked about a mid-year hearing to investigate and address fuel costs that were increasing. Do you recall her asking that question?
I do.
And do you understand that the commission could require Dominion, in the appropriate case, to come in mid-year for a fuel proceeding? Do you understand that?
You're getting a little bit into a legal area about the jurisdiction of the commission, but I believe so, yes.
All right. And another tool in the toolkit that the ORS and this company and Duke, for instance, have exercised is that the commission has, in the appropriate case, deferred recovery of some undercollection in the past. You understand that to be the case, don't you?
Yes, that has happened on occasion.
All right. And in those cases, to make Dominion or Duke or any of the IOUs whole, the undercollected amount is repaid with carrying costs, interest. You understand that to be the case, don't you?
That has been a case in the past.
Okay. Now, and just by way of example for all this, I think in response to one of Commissioner Williams' questions, Mr. Rooks testified about the mid-year 2008 fuel proceeding for then SCE&G. Do you recall that?
I do.
Now, I noticed that you testified in the 2008 fuel proceeding, and I would trust that since you have been active in the at the ORS in electric matters, you would have some familiarity with the 2008 midterm fuel case. Is that the case?
I was involved in the review of that case.
You say you were?
Yes, I believe it was another ORS witness that testified in it, but I was involved in that review. But I will say, Mr. Elliott, that was some years ago.
I understand. I had to get some my recollection refreshed by Ms. Edwards, in fact. So, but you recall, just generally speaking, that then E&G had due to circumstances beyond the control, circumstances don't matter, energy prices had spiked and SCE&G came in for a midterm recovery. You recall that, generally speaking?
I do recall that, and there was a fairly significant increase to customers' rates as a result of that proceeding.
And we're going to talk about that. So E&G asked for a phase-in. They asked for an increase to about 3.2 cents per kilowatt hour in phase 1 and maybe 3.6 cents per kilowatt hour in phase 2. Does that sound familiar to you?
I'm afraid that was some time ago. I don't recall the details of the case.
All right. But you recall that that the parties decided that they would just give E&G the first increase to about 3.2% and deferred any consideration about a second increase to the 2009 proceeding.
Again, I don't recall the details of the case.
All right. But you do recall that in 2009, SCE&G came in to recover that amount, and I think Mr. Rooks testified that the fuel factor got as high as 3.6. He testified that that the 3.6 was the highest fuel factor in his experience. Do you recall his testifying to that?
I recall Mr. Rooks testifying to that.
All right, and do you recall generally that, that in 2009, when Dominion, South Carolina Electric and Gas came in, that this commission decided that at that point, when the fuel factor went from 3.2 to 3.6, that it would then exercise its authority to defer recovery for some of those fuel costs, correct?
If I recall, I believe that that position was brought forth by some of the parties, and the commission approved a settlement agreement in that case.
You recall correctly. And do you recall that the commission in that case, when it approved the 3.621 fuel factor, it deferred recovery of the complete under recovery for a period of 3 years? Do you recall that?
I do not.
All right. If I showed you order number 2009-289, issued April 30, 2009, and draw your attention to the highlighted language on the page, would that refresh your recollection?
Yes.
All right, thank you. And so the point in my asking all that is to simply get your help in assisting me, assist the commission to understand that they do have tools in their toolkit in the appropriate case when there's a spike in fuel cost. And I appreciate that. Now, the requested amount here, you recall from your testimony, your Exhibit 5 is about 3.1 fuel factor?
A base fuel factor of 3.013 cents per kilowatt hour with the various environmental avoided cost components and DERP avoided cost components per customer class. The total fuel factors vary somewhat.
Yes, sir. That's fine. But the base fuel is 3.1 something, correct?
3.032.
Good, which is less than the amount that we discussed in the midterm 2008 proceeding. Now, you are, would it be fair to say that the most senior witness here on the stand, among the 4 witnesses, are you the most senior?
I think it's safe to say that, yes.
All right. And as I understand it, and you've been there a long time and have risen through the ranks and done a nice job, you are involved in decision-making in cases such as this fuel case as to what position the ORS might take in the case. Are you not?
To some degree, yes. I make my recommendations to ORS senior management, who makes the final determination for our recommendations to the commission.
Good. Now, and in your analysis and in your conversations with the Ms. Hipp and Ms. Edwards, you analyzed and discussed the possibility of perhaps seeking a deferral from this commission and from the company, did you not?
That subject did come up and is not our recommendation to make a deferral, or to recommend a deferral to the commission.
I understand. And the rationale for that, for your decision not to recommend a deferral, is because, as Mr. Rooks and you pointed out in your testimony, these fuel costs are still trending upward as of this moment, correct?
That is one part of the reasoning behind our determination.
And you anticipate, based on what you see here today, that the fuel costs will be, the Dominion will experience an undercollection again in 2023, correct?
I will say that my flux capacitor is on back order, that my crystal ball is also offline, so I cannot really predict the future. but we are in extremely uncertain times, and it wouldn't surprise me if the company were to have an under collection this time next year.
And I'm not asking you to peer into the little 8-ball. Rather, I'm asking you to rely upon your 16 years of experience at the Office of Regulatory Staff, your analysis of this case, your appearances in 25 or 30 of these cases. I'm just asking you for a reasonable effort to forecast, and using your reasonable efforts, you would forecast an under collection in 2023, correct?
At this time, yes, sir.
And you would have a concern that if the commission deferred some part of this increase to 2023, then you would be piling that deferred amount on top of another under collection, correct?
Very much so.
And so that is a concern gave you pause about recommending a deferral in this case, right?
Yes.
And you considered at the ORS a mid-year review, did you not?
No, sir, we have not considered that.
You have not had any conversation with your leadership about a deferral?
We had a conversation about it, but it was simply, there was a mid-year field case in 2008, but nothing beyond that.
Now, isn't it fair to say that if Dominion is experiencing this, what Ms. Jackson testified to be really an unprecedented flux, I think there's certainly the pressures brought to bear on fuel prices is unprecedented. If Dominion's feeling it, so are Duke Energy Carolinas and Duke Energy Progress, correct?
I reviewed the monthly fuel reports for both of those companies and will say yes, both of those companies are experiencing large under-recovered base fuel balances.
And you're aware that on March 31, 2022, Progress is forecasting an increase in rates of between 13.7% to 17% based on fuel increases. You're aware of that, aren't you?
I'm not sure where you're getting that information, Mr. Scott, but I do expect them to have higher fuel rates than they currently have.
Well, if you'll permit me, I might suggest that for the next proceeding, you might speak with Ms. Hipp. She would have a copy of this fuel forecast. So, but you would agree with me that I call it Progress and Duke, so I can distinguish between the two, but the Progress companies and the Duke companies are looking at the same thing that the Dominion people are, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, as we've established that you were here for Mr. Rooks's testimony, did you hear Mr. Rooks testify that based on the fuel alone, just the fuel, the medium general, I guess, customer class would be looking at approximately a 6.3% rate increase here?
Yes, sir.
And did you do an independent analysis of the rate impact on the medium general customer class?
We looked through the company's calculations that they provided to us and did not see any errors in those calculations.
All right, so you would concur in that number?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then you were here when Mr. Rooks testified that the rate increase to the large general customer class, the industrial customers, would be 9.95%, correct?
That sounds correct, yes.
All right. Now, ordinarily, I thought that y'all put the rate impact in your testimony, and when you're the witness, I seem to recall that you, as a matter of practice, put these rate increases in your testimony for the reader to see, but I didn't find the rate increases in your testimony. Did I miss it?
No, sir. We typically do not put the impacts to commercial and industrial customers into our fuel testimony. You may be thinking about our general rate case testimony.
Well, do you think there'd be some value to all your customers to see the rate impact of in these fuel cases in black and white from the regulator?
I will say that we are always looking to improve our processes and provide whatever information that the commission deems valuable.
Okay, so I mean, if it would require a commission order for you to put these rate increases in your fuel testimony?
Not necessarily, Mr. Scott. We'll definitely be, take that into consideration. I'll take that back and discuss it with my management.
That'd be very fine. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if you'll excuse me, you're welcome to that, but I'm going to get in trouble with Ms. Weed if I don't return this. Thank you.
All right. CCL.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We don't have any questions for this panel.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioners.
Chairman
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today and for your testimony. My questions are probably going to be more for Mr. Seaman Wynn, but feel free to jump in as you feel you're the expert. Would you talk some about, and you have it in your testimony, the drivers for the rate change in this proceeding? Will you add to the testimony in that regard?
Absolutely, Commissioner. I'm happy to. So, as we have seen, the company is experiencing increased fuel costs due to higher commodity prices than what has been forecasted. This is coming out from, as explained by numerous company witnesses, numerous different factors, the most recent of which is the turmoil going on in Ukraine. This has put upward pressure on multiple commodity prices, coal, natural gas, fuel, oil. As a company witness, Brookmeyer said, there's unrest when it comes to the nuclear fuel industry. There are numerous upward pressures on natural gas pipeline capacity. All of this is leading to increased fuel costs for the company.
Given that, and given the relationship between the forecasted fuel expenditures and the more recent actual expenditures that we've seen, did ORS discuss recommending a mid-year evaluation for the next year?
There may have been some high-level discussions, but it's definitely not a recommendation that we have. And for numerous reasons that I'm happy to go into, we are also not recommending a deferral to the commission.
And I didn't mean to be asking about the deferral, but I was asking whether and I'd like to hear more about your recommendation for kind of a mid-year look at future fuel costs.
Yes, ma'am. So a mid-year adjustment, well, first off, fuel costs, as the commission knows, is a straight pass-through. The company does not earn any return on that, and it goes straight through to the ratepayers. With that in mind, the company does not have any incentive to do anything more than economically dispatch its units and provide the lowest fuel costs possible. The company is also, through the Fuel Act, entitled to recover all of its prudently incurred fuel costs. The company is already seeking as Mr. Elliott said, and Mr. Rook said, over a 5% increase in this fuel case. With fuel prices continuing to incur, a mid-year adjustment, a mid-year review would potentially have the company have a shorter time to either recover some additional fuel costs, but that would most likely put additional upward pressure on customers' bills later this year, with the possibility of, again, having to increase rates again this time next year. As Mr. Rooks said, stability for customers is one of the reasons, or one of the things that the company keeps in mind, is something that ORS keeps in mind. We try to provide as much, make recommendations to the commission to provide as much stability and for customers. And for those various reasons, we're not recommending a mid-year fuel adjustment.
Do you believe that the Toshiba and Westinghouse settlements are being used in the most prudent manner possible?
I absolutely do, Commissioner. This is a significant amount of money that the company owes back to the ratepayers. The annual fuel review gets that money back to customers in the most expedited fashion possible. If the company to wait until its next general rate proceeding, then we'd be looking at minimum 2023, 2024 before those proceeds would be returned to customers. By the company taking the Toshiba settlement, the WEC settlement, as well as the adjustment to the VIC, those dollars are being used to offset the company's base fuel under collection in this case, which immediately goes back to the customers.
I might jump around a little bit, but there was discussion talked about if there was a deferral, that then the company is entitled to carrying cost?
Traditionally speaking, when the company, ORS, and other parties have brought a settlement agreement to the commission, a deferral has included carrying costs, yes.
And in the current circumstance, there's no carrying cost associated with this fuel request?
There's not a deferral being recommended, and as the rates are designed to fully recover the company's under-collected balance as of the end of the forecasted period, there are no carrying costs included in this case.
Okay. And did ORS consider recommending that the cost be spread out over future years? You've already answered that. Never mind.
That would be a deferral, yes, ma'am.
Right. And you talked about we're not sure where, costs are going, and we could just be kicking the can farther.
We would, Commissioner, and if you'll let me expand upon that just
Sure.
a little bit. There are numerous reasons why ORS is making this recommendation to the Commission. The first of which is that the company continues to incur base fuel under recovery balances and will continue to do so through April of 2022 when new fuel rates go into effect. The current rates that they have in effect continue to not address the company's needs on fuel.
Mm-hmm.
The rates that the company is proposing were based on a forecast, as Mr. Rooks said, from a natural gas strip in the $3 range as of December of last year. We are now in $6 a decatherm gas. So the forecast that the company is recommending to the Commission is already going to result in, most likely, unless things change, an under-recovered balance next year.
Mm-hmm.
In this fuel case, as we just discussed, Commissioner, the company is offsetting its fuel by $68 million. That is a one-time event that the company will have expended those funds and will not have them again to offset any fuel under-recovery balance in the future. For those reasons, we are not recommending a deferral to the Commission.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
No
ma'am.
further questions.
Commissioner Caston.
Kind of listening to the questions, conversations, your responses, and looking at, I guess, your direct testimony, page 8, about does ORS have any additional recommendations regarding the company's annual fuel filings? And Do you recommend these forecasts be provided on a quarterly basis after the company's new fuel rates are effective? I mean, I'm reading that, so I don't need to read you what.
Yes, sir.
Would that be primarily during periods such as this when there are very high or fluctuating fuel costs, or would that be a norm, or?
Yes, sir. That would absolutely be a norm. If I can, the company and ORS, and SCEUC, and other interveners have been able to reach settlement agreements in the past and present those to the commission. As part of each of those settlement agreements, the parties agreed that the company would provide a fuel forecast during the same time frames that I have addressed in my direct testimony. ORS felt that it would be prudent to include this type of language recommending these types of forecasts to the interested parties in the event that we were unable to reach settlement agreements in a fuel proceeding. That is the case in this particular fuel proceeding. So we are not going beyond anything that the company is currently doing. We're just have included it in our testimony to try to ensure that that practice continues. And this practice benefits not just ORS in having a forecast of where the company's fuel costs are, but this typically also goes to CMC Steel, SCEUC, to allow those entities to forecast what fuel prices could be for their own budgets. So this is a benefit to not just ORS, but other parties as well.
Okay, that does clear that up. And I guess seems like what I've heard from all the parties is if anyone could control the gas prices, they would, and they wouldn't let them go this high, but they are what they are. And the longer you delay the pain, the worse the pain gets. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement, Commissioner. I believe so, yes, sir.
I have no more questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chair Belzer.
Good afternoon, Mr. Seaman Wynn.
Good afternoon, Ms. Belzer. Commissioner Belzer, excuse
Mr.
me.
Bickley, you're off the hook right now. The order that Mr. Elliott showed you that from, I think it was 08 that had the deferral, was that a settlement? Do you recall?
I believe that it was subject to check, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. And you just discussed the quarterly forecast with Commissioner Caston, but the utility files with the commission and provides to ORS as well a monthly fuel expenditure sheet, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
How far in arrears is that? Is that a month in arrears or 3 months? Or do you know?
For Dominion, they filed yesterday, and that provided actuals through February of this year. So
about a month.
2 months.
2 months.
This is April, end of May. I'm sorry, about a month, yes.
I know it's been a long couple of days. And ORS monitors that, don't they?
Yes, we do.
And the fuel statute allows not only the utility to ask for a mid-year review, but ORS could ask for a mid-year review, mid-year proceeding as well. Are you aware of that?
That does sound correct, yes.
So if there was a sudden, well, if things got a lot better, ORS could ask to come back in, or the utility could ask to decrease. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
But if things continue trending poorly, y'all might look at that at that point as well. Is that correct?
I would say that ORS is not limiting itself to any option.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate y'all's testimony today. Thank you.
All right, redirect.
No redirect. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Gentlemen, thank you for your testimony. You may step down and you are excused.
Thank you.
This concludes ORS's case, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we're in recess until 3:40. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Public Service Commission of South Carolina. We're here in docket number 2022 2-E. Present in the hearing room, we have Commissioner J. Williams, Caston C. Williams, Thomas Powers, and Belzer. Joining us virtually, we have Commissioner Irvin. All right. Is there anything else that needs to come before the commission today? All right. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your professionalism and efficiency. We are adjourned. Thank you.